Happy New Year, everyone. In this video, I'm going to go over which constellations 4-star characters are fine with. In other words, I'm going to go over a good stopping point for constellations. This video is for low spenders, free-to-play, or new players who want to know which constellations are good enough. Obviously, C6 should be good on everyone, with the exception of Bennett. However, getting C6 on a 4-star can take a while without spending a lot of money. This list will help you understand which constellations are most optimal. I will go into detail for each character. Let's get started. First, we have Amber. She is only obtainable through the standard banner or star glitter exchange. With every new 4-star being added to the standard banner, she is getting harder to obtain with every patch. Even then, her constellations don't do very much for her, so I would leave her at C0 unless you really enjoy using her. Next, Barbara. The Barbara doesn't generate particles with her skill, so Constellation 1 fixes this slightly. C2 decreases the cooldown on her skill, allowing her to have it up more often. It also increases the hydro damage bonus of your active character, which makes her stronger with other hydro characters. Her other constellations are nice to have, but you don't need them. Next, Beidou. Beidou C1 creates a shield based on 16% of her max HP when she casts her burst. C2 also allows her burst to jump to 2 additional targets. These 2 constellations allow her to provide more utility and damage for the party. Her C6 decreases electro resistance of enemies, but it's not necessary on her. Next, Bennett. So this one is widely talked about. He only needs Constellation 1. This is because it removes the HP restriction to gain his attack buff, and it also grants an additional 20% base attack. You can go for C5, but C1 is good enough. I would not recommend C6ing him because a lot of characters don't really want Pyro Infusion, but if you do it, more power to you. Next, Chongyun. So his C2 gives cooldown reduction to any party member standing inside of his elemental skill. Cooldown reduction is pretty rare in Genshin, so this is a good constellation to have if you run him in your party. Next, Diona. Diona's C6 is very strong. While standing in her burst, it has one of 2 effects. If your character is below half HP, they get incoming healing bonus. If your character is above half HP, they gain 200 elemental mastery. 200 elemental mastery is a lot, which is basically a whole artifact. This allows your party members to do more damage with elemental reactions. Next, Fischl. Fischl's C6 allows Oz to stay on the field for longer, while also dealing additional electro damage. Oz being on the field for longer basically allows you to have him up almost 100% of the time, while the coordinated electro attacks ramp up in damage. Next, Kaeya. So Kaeya is just like Amber. He's only in the standard banner and star glitter exchange. If you somehow manage to get C2, that is a good stopping point. Otherwise, I would just leave him at C0. He is hard to get constellations with. Next, Lisa. So just like Amber and Kaeya, her constellations are hard to get. They're not useless, but they're not too helpful either. Next, Ningguang. Her C1 allows her normal attacks to do AoE damage, which makes her better as a main DPS. Her other constellations are utility based, which are nice to have, but aren't necessary. Next, Noelle. So it depends on how you're playing her. If you're using her as a shield and healer only, C1 is good enough. If you're trying to go for main DPS, go for C6. Her C6 allows her to become a main DPS. Without C6, her damage is a little bit lackluster. Next, Razor. Razor's C1, C2, and C4 are all useful on him and suit his playstyle. C4 is especially important because it allows him to shred the defense of opponents by 15% when pressing his skill. This increases his overall damage for both himself and off-field damage dealers in the party. Next, Sucrose. At C6, she can buff elemental damage bonus by 20% based on which element was infused with her burst. This makes C6 worth chasing on her. Next, Xiangling. Xiangling's C4 increases her burst duration by 4 seconds. C1 lowers pyro resistance and C6 buffs pyro damage. For all general purpose uses, she is best at C4 and does not necessarily need C6. Next, Xingqiu. So his C6 increases his rain sword damage every third hit, while also generating energy for him. This lowers his energy requirements. Chasing C6 on him is definitely worth it. Next, Xinyan. So Xinyan's design is a bit strange, but if you decide to go for her constellations, I would recommend stopping at C4. It allows her to lower physical resistance by 15%. With C2, she always creates a level 3 shield from her kit. Next, Rosaria. Rosaria's C2 increases her burst duration, which lets her do more damage off-field. If you are running her with a physical damage team, you can go for C6. Next, Yanfei. Yanfei requires a lot of stamina when doing charged attacks, and her C1 lowers the cost, which makes C1 really nice to have. Her C2 also increases charged attack crit rate against opponents with less than half HP, which lowers crit rate requirements. C4 and C6 are nice to have, but aren't necessary. Next, Sayu. Sayu only needs C1. Her other constellations are either for more damage, healing, or lower energy requirements. C1 allows her burst to heal and attack simultaneously while it's on the field. The difference between C0 and C1 is huge. Next, Kujou Sara. Kujou Sara is a dedicated support for specific teams. These kinds of characters almost always want C6 due to the nature of their kit. Her C6 buffs electro crit damage by 60%, which is worth chasing if you use electro-based teams. Next, Thoma. Thoma at C0 has many issues. He has long cooldowns, he is energy hungry, and has a lack of support in his kit. At C6, all of these problems get mitigated. His C6 also buffs normal, charged, and plunging attack damage by 15%, which is very strong. Next, Gorou. Gorou is perfectly fine at C0, but really shines at C6 in mono geo teams. Just like Kujou Sara, he is a dedicated support that gains much more power at C6. At C4 he becomes a healer, and at C6 he buffs geo crit damage. Next, Yunjin. Yunjin's C2 increases normal attack damage by 15% during her elemental burst. This C2 becomes more valuable at C6 because of the increased attack speed, but C6 is not necessary on her. Next, Kuki Shinobu. So Shinobu is very good at C0 and does not need any constellations. If you decide to chase any, C2 is a good stopping point because it extends the duration of her skill by 3 seconds. This is good if you're running her with something like 4-piece tenacity, so she can maintain the buff for even longer. Next, Heizou. Heizou does a lot of damage at C0. His constellations increases damage, while C2 and C4 are more quality of life changes. He is fine at C0, but chasing his constellations is completely fine as well. Next, Collei. If you have ever looked at Collei's C2 description, it is very long. In Razor language, her C2 lets her apply Dendro more. C4 is also fine to chase, but I think C2 is a good stopping point. Next, Dori. Dori's constellations don't really help her that much. C4 does increase her healing and energy recharge for party members, but it is not worth chasing in my opinion. She is perfectly fine at C0. Next, Candace. Candace's C2 increases her overall damage and supporting capabilities due to the HP increase. C1 gives her a longer burst duration. C2 is a good stopping point for her, but she is still good at C0. Next, Layla. Layla's constellations don't help her that much. They aren't bad to have, but they're not worth chasing. She is very good at C0 as a shielder. Next, Faruzan. The Faruzan is a dedicated support just like Kujou Sara and Gorou. Her C6 fixes her energy issues as well as providing 40% animal crit damage. The difference between C0 and C6 Faruzan is very noticeable. And last, Yao Yao. So, she isn't released yet, but I'm just going to make a guess here. I'm thinking she will be good with C2, and that's a good stopping point for her. This is because it restores energy to her and her burst costs 80. Her other constellations don't seem necessary, but we'll have to wait and see. So this is my list. Ideally, you would want C6 on everyone except for Bennett. If you can't get many 4 stars, I hope this will help you in choosing which 4 stars to go for in banners. If you plan to pull for a specific 4 star on a banner, good luck on your wishes. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more.